The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
So you may notice there's a couple of parts in the feed. This is part 2. You may want to go back and listen to part 1. You don't have to. The stories are mostly independent, but they show kind of how we got here, looking at the cases that we're looking at. But if you haven't listened to the E.E. Lee case, that's part 1 of this, and then this is part 2. There's a young man born in Laos in 1968. He is one of 6 children in his family. His dad, by all reports, appears to work for the American government during the Vietnam War. In 1975, at the end of the Laotian Civil War, this kid is going to spend the rest of childhood in a refugee camp in Thailand. By 1980, they relocate to the United States and they settle in St. Paul, Minnesota. So they end up, at one point, they're in Stockton, California, and in his teens, this kid's a paper delivery boy. By 1985 or so, I think, during high school, they joined the California Cadet Corps. They found a Hmong Student Association, and they're going to graduate in 1987 and work as a social service worker for refugees. By the age of 21, they joined the California National Guard as part of the 236th Medical Brigade. He's going to get medals, and he's going to work as a truck driver in Sacramento following his discharge in 1995. One of the medals is good conduct. One of the medals that's pointed out in these proceedings is a sharpshooter badge. By 1999, and I'll go ahead and name him. His name is Khai Souvang. It's spelled Chisouvang. Khai gets an associate's degree, operates a long-haul trucking service. And in 2000, they moved back to St. Paul, Minnesota. They take a delivery job. He takes a delivery job up there. He has 7 kids. And he is considered the family shaman. Basically, there's a spiritual side to it, but think if every family had an EMT, is how we're politely going to address that. On Christmas Eve of 2001, police respond to a 911 call from Khai's house. This is according to the Minneapolis Police Department. There's a quarrel there where he wants to go out and his wife, Say, doesn't want him to leave. His daughter recalls running out of the room, and her father, who is a pretty avid hunter at this point, and obviously he was a sharpshooter in the California National Guard, she sees her father with a gun. So they arrest Khai. They don't file charges because Say doesn't cooperate with the investigators trying to help her. And a few months later, Say moves with at least 5 of the kids, and depending on where you fall in this story, I think they have 5 and then 2 kids with a new wife, maybe, is how this goes. But she moves to Wisconsin with her parents because that's where this community that we were talking about is pretty prevalent. So they live up in Milwaukee. Khai gets married again, doesn't last very long. The new wife, according to his story, she gambles a lot, and he nearly chokes her to death. By 2004, he's remarried again. But where he comes into being a story that we're going to cover is November of 2004. November 21st, 2004 is a time that a lot of people go hunting, including Kai Beige. On the weekend of the shootings, Kai goes out deer hunting. He's got a couple of friends, and two sons of the friends are with them. They're out in northwest Wisconsin. This is an area that apparently, like, whitetail deer hunting is very popular. It's around the town of Meteor, Wisconsin. And Meteor is a huge town, not as many people. The land in this area is a mix of game lands that are owned privately and then state land. I think there's even some county land in here. It is believed that they start out on state land, but somehow Kai ends up on a set of private acres. And that's because there's questions about what actually ended up happening. There's a hunting party at a cabin on this private land of 400 or so acres. And on Sunday, November 21st, there's about 15 people there. Terry Willers is one of the co-owners of the land. He leaves the cabin and he sees Kai sitting up in a deer stand. So he's got a little handheld radio. He asks back over the radio to the people in the cabin whether or not anyone should be in that particular deer stand. They basically come back and say, no, there's nobody out there. All of our party is here or in their appropriate place. Nobody would be down that way. So Terry goes over to Kai and says, hey, you got to leave. Now, depending on which story you believe, there might be some racial slurs involved. Kai apologizes to the folks that are part of this hunting party that are confronting him, specifically Terry, and he starts moving south, and he is going to, it's not a road, but it looks like a big utility trail that would lead him out of the 400 acres, kind of back to where he came from. According to Terry Willer's testimony, he says, as Bob got back on the radio and asked me where he was at, I said he's down on the food plot right now, and I radioed into the cabin that I had a quote-unquote tree rat, and I had chased him off. At this point, 5 of the hunters from the cabin hear what's going on the radio. They come down to the tree stand. According to testimony from Lauren Hessebeck, they state that Bob had said, I'm going to go talk to him to find out who he is, why he's there, and then make sure he doesn't, I want him to know that he's on private property. He's not welcome here. Denny had said to me that this ought to be interesting. Let's go and see what's going on. So we all got in the back of, they have like this ATV that has a little roll cage on it. Multiple people get into it, and there's a couple of them that are standing up and kind of hanging on to it. So they get directions from Terry Willers, and this group goes down to approach Kai further down the trail. One of the people that's involved here suggested making a note of his hunting license number and to make a report to DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources. They oversee the licensing. According to Lauren's testimony, they approach Kai and they flip the hunting tag over to get the license number. I think they wear them there, like on their body.
That's the impression I got. I felt like that wasn't necessarily appropriate, but it wasn't the worst thing somebody could do.
Right. And so I'm trying to give it in like a pretty neutral regard here. This hunting party, like this is the physical people from the larger group that are approaching Kai. It's made up of Robert James, who goes by Bob Croteau, Joseph G. Croteau, who goes by Joey. Bob is 42, Joey's 20. A guy named Alan Lasky is with them. A guy named Mark Rolt, who's 28. Alan's 43, Mark is 28. They have a woman named Jessica Marie Willers, who's 27, and a guy named Denny, his name is Dennis Robert Drew. He's 55. And then Lauren Hessebeck is 48. And Terry Willers is 47. So we have eyewitnesses to what I'm going to describe next, but we have differing accounts of all of this.
And essentially where you just left off was that the hunting tag that he was wearing had been flipped over so they could get his license number.
Right. So this becomes a confrontation where they want to identify him and make a report. And depending on who you believe here, they're maybe not using the nicest language, and this confrontation gets violent very quickly. There's some dispute to like how violent and how quickly, but I'm going to lay out what's in summary. According to everybody at the scene, and I think I'll come back around to Kai, but according to everybody at the scene, gunshots break out, which we know are true because we have projectiles and we have people hit by these gunshots. It is believed that Kai fires 20 rounds. The rifle's recovered by police. He really messes them up. So, according to the investigation, he's raising the rifle up and he is sweeping, circling. He fires at Terry Willers. According to Kai's testimony, he felt like if he didn't shoot Terry, Terry was going to shoot him. His first shot misses Willers. Terry runs away. He dives for cover, but he lands on his rifle. He can't roll over. So Kai's second shot hits him in his lower left neck, and that keeps him on the ground. By this point, everybody's panicking because now we have gunshots in the woods.
Right. And I just want to point out, I'm not sure if you can obviously tell me if if I'm wrong, but this started with him raising the rifle and kneeling.
Yes, that is correct. And
okay.
He kneels and like he basically moves into a sharpshooter's position based on everybody's testimony.
It's insane. And I wondered
how threatening were they to him that he felt like he needed to do that?
Well, and then like, what did they think when that was happening? Because that would have been crazy. And, you know, he did say, if I don't shoot him, he would shoot me. And my initial response is like, that's not typically the response you're going to have when you need to use self-defense, to kneel down and aim.
Correct.
Okay. Cause he was still, I imagine, sort of right in the middle of all them.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. And they know they are scattering away from him at this point. And that's going to really hurt Kai's case later. But once he hits Terry Willers, he turns on the men who are on their ATVs, these ATVs I was talking about that they piled in on. So he shoots Mark Roy, and Mark Roy, by all accounts, including the medical examiner, he is going to die instantly. He actually is going to fall off the ATV in a way that it's going to keep moving. And according to what I read, it was a single headshot that Mark is hit with. So he's got the ATV kind of slowly moving down the trail. Kai then turns and he shoots Denny. And that shot, I don't know exactly where the shot lands. I got the impression it was some kind of neck shot, but whatever it was, it kills Denny. And then the Bob and Joey, I think they're father-son, the way this read out.
They are.
The Croteaus. So Bob and Joey, they flee. And at this point, he fires 3 shots at Lauren Hessebeck. And like I've read accounts that Hessebeck is like close to the other ATV or the same ATV, and that Kai has to get up and move towards him, shooting him. And it says that the third round had partially disemboweled Hasselbeck, and at that point they fell and laid still. Bob had fled and called back to the cabin on a walkie-talkie, telling Lasky, who's Alan James Lasky, to come to bring guns and to help, which sounds like a terrible idea. Kai's first shot misses him, but the second shot hits and kills Bob as he's fleeing and calling for assistance. Terry remained down, but he's gotten some feeling back in his fingers. He ends up being able to call to the cabin for help. And as he's calling the cabin for help, Kai has turned his attention away from Bob and has moved to the younger Croteau, who is fleeing down a trail. And Kai sprints to cut him off. He closes the gap and he shoots him in the lower back. It's a long shot from what I read. I don't know that it's exactly 200 feet, but it's about 200 feet away. He then reloads. He approaches him. And Joey is either trying to get away or trying to figure out what to do. And Kai shoots him again. He closes in on him, and he's going to shoot him 2 more times from behind. And so I've heard that the kill shots were 4 shots to the center of his body, and that he shot him the final time in the back of his head. So now Kai flips his Blaze Orange hunting coat. So like you wear like visible colors so that other hunters know you're there. Sometimes those are reversible, and the inside of Kai's Blaze Orange hunting coat is camouflage. So he is now camouflaged. He's able to hide at a turn in the trail. He hears the other ATV approaching, and he thinks the people on the ATV are going to be armed because of like what he's been able to hear in the chaos. So on this ATV, we have Alan Lasky and Jessica Willers. So Jessica is Terry's daughter. He waits until they go past and he fires at them. He hits Jessica once in her left buttock area. He hits Lasky in his back and shatters his lower spine. He then runs over, shoots Lasky in the back. He steps behind Jessica Willers, and I've heard this called center mass, but what the description that stuck with me was he shoots her in the center of the back of her neck. He then goes back to where the shooting started to pick up a scope that was not on his gun at the time. And as he gets closer to that area, Lauren Hasselbeck and Kai Bang, they get into each other's territory. Kai says, "You're not dead yet," raises the rifle, and is about to shoot Lauren Hasselbeck, who grabs Terry Willer's rifle with his right hand. He dives for cover, and those shots miss Lauren Hasselbeck. So Hasselbeck can't point or aim the rifle because of a wound to the left arm. Or I think it's the shoulder specifically, but I can't tell who had the shoulder wound and who had the neck wound between Terry and Lauren. But the bottom line is these are 2 survivors. They're able to shoot back or try to shoot back. I think at one point Hasselbeck turns to fire and goes to pull the trigger and the safety's still engaged. It's not his rifle. He has taken it from someone laying nearby. He drags this rifle up their body, like you're trying to figure out where on the rifle the safety is. And he's able to take the safety off. He points it again and fires. And he then hears the click of Kai's rifle, and he realizes Kai has to now reload. He's out of bullets. Kai flees at this point. He throws what remaining ammunition he had away. In his statements later on, he says he didn't want to shoot anyone else. He ends up finding another hunter who is riding an ATV completely unrelated to all of this, and that hunter gives him a ride, taking him back to the cabin where he was. When he arrives at this cabin, about 5 hours after the shooting, they're going to arrest Kai Bae, and an officer is going to place him into custody. They transport him to the Sawyer County Jail, and he's going to be held here on $2.5 million bail. This is a disaster.
It is a complete disaster.
And according to the investigation into this, about why this became such a disaster so quickly, including comments from the survivors, because remember, Terry and Lauren survived, and obviously Kai was there. According to Kai's statement, Terry Willers took the first shot at him from 100 feet away, and he is going to stand by the idea that all of this nonsense and chaos was in self-defense. According to the trial court, there's no shell casing ever recovered from Terry Willers' gun, even though during the trial, Lauren Hessebeck admits to firing a single shot later on during the incident when Vang noticed, when Kai noticed that Lauren was still alive, firing at him again. So, according to Lauren's testimony, no shot was fired before Kai started shooting.
Which I believe.
Well, it appears to bear out at trial. So, there's not much of a question of it.
Well, because if you think about where they're at, which we get a very, I have to add a lot of my mental picture painting to this because, which I guess would make it speculation, but I always try to use the facts. We're in a situation where they are on private land that they know abuts public land, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so if you recall, at one point, someone gets on the radio and tells the people that are back at the house to come and bring guns. And I believe you said, that's a terrible idea. But it makes me think, there was no part of this that was supposed to be confrontational to this degree. Right?
I don't think they showed up to shoot this guy at all. No.
No, not at all. But there's a few things to think about as far as the initial situation where you've got somebody who is outside of where they're staying and they see somebody that's not part of their group. They say, hey, is anybody supposed to be there? And the consensus is no, so they ask them to leave. Now, I think it's entirely possible that Kai had no idea he was on someone's property.
Yeah.
I think that it could have, especially if he was under the impression that it was the public property. I guess it's public property, right? Is that right?
He is. So the tree stand this all starts at is private land.
Okay, but it is
close to state game land. Yes.
Okay, that's what I mean. And so I feel like and I could be wrong. I feel like he thought there was a unearned sense of entitlement from these people that he had this confrontation with, where he thought they were trying to claim the public land for their use. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's the first miscommunication that occurs. Because I did not know that there was a problem with any sort of racial disparity.
I'm not even sure that that's what's happening here as much as maybe there's some misunderstanding. This guy clearly speaks English.
Well, I wondered if he might have a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and assumed that, like, if he said, oh, they think they're entitled to tell me what part of the public land I can and can't use, even though they're not saying that. They're saying, like, this is private land. You've got to go to the public land, right?
Yeah.
I think that he could have interpreted a bias that wasn't even there. Now, he says, and, Terry Willers is who initially confronts him, and he survives. And I don't know if I'm sure he testified. I don't know if he said, yeah, I called him like slur words or whatever, but we don't know what happened, right? And it really doesn't matter, because there's a lot of things about being on hunting land you're not supposed to be on that is inherently dangerous. I'm not saying that it gives you the right to slur at someone, but like, there's a lot of reasons to make sure people understand, like, don't be here, right? They could be shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I think that he grew up in an echo chamber, that, because, you said earlier when you were going through kind of like his immigration to the United States and how he founded, like, I don't know,
Hmong American group,
the Association of Hmong America, yeah, and he's on the, at least the offensive, which could be just being proactive about the culture he belongs to, right? But it's almost like that echo chamber did not serve him well. And he saw things that, while it made no difference what his race or nationality was, the people would have told anybody they saw there to leave, right?
Yeah.
And I think that he could have been skewed ever so slightly to get really enraged, because he had some sort of experience at some point or another that contributed to that. Or I thought maybe like I don't know what the interactions were like for him with how his family was treated. And it might have even just been a perception from like his parents, like, because they experienced the immigration the way that they did, they didn't want to, like, it wasn't that they were actually being, discriminated against. They just, maybe they were grateful they were able to escape, and they didn't want to seem burdensome, right? And the kids took that the wrong way.
What do you mean, the kids?
Well, his family, and like,
you mean his generation in the family?
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Not his kids, though.
Not his kids. Him and his siblings.
Okay.
Because what I'm trying to get at here is, I feel like he's saying, like, I was the victim of a racial, like, hate crime, basically. I mean, that's what he's saying, right?
It kind of goes down that path, and then it becomes like more of an excuse to explain the situation.
Well, because what he did is bonkers.
Right. Yeah, on any level, which, like, when it comes time for like the trial. So the trial gets going, and they talk about certain parts of this. There's clearly some animosity between the people involved, but not to the level that, like, we suddenly kill multiple hunters in the woods. You know what I mean? When
you're standing, like, on your ATV or whatever, you and your group have confronted a trespasser,
right,
and said, you can't be here and perhaps pointed a way that they should go to get back on the public hunting land, right?
Well, even if you just tell them to leave, they got there somehow.
Well, right. But I'm saying, like, so you're standing there, this is what happens. You're like, okay, so yeah, these are our tree stands, and for your own safety, like, you can't trespass here and use it to hunt.
Right.
And then the man who you just said that to, like, points his gun and kneels down, and in a sweeping motion, like, that's something that you can't really get from all the chaos, but it was sort of in a orderly fashion that he swept with his gun around, and was shooting.
Yeah. He was shooting, sighting. I mean, it was almost described as kind of clinical.
And it was insane. I think that the reason that most of them were shot and killed was because it was so far out of the realm of what they could have imagined was about to happen that they didn't even have a chance to process it.
Yeah.
Because when you're having a civilized conversation with anybody about anything, even in hunting, like even at a hunting lodge, you don't think it's going to turn into a one-sided gunfight.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So this has become a one-sided gunfight, and the only thing we ever hear out of this that's like, I think it's still in dispute, but we get pretty clear and convincing evidence that he was at least called an asshole, or maybe a Hmong asshole, referencing his race.
Well,
Lauren,
I believe that was actually, I mean, not the Hmong part, but I believe he was an asshole. He shot all those people.
Oh, yeah. It's not wrong. But I think that's like kind of as far as I don't know if there was more racial things said. I'm not saying that.
It doesn't matter either way. It's not right.
That's where I'm headed. Yeah. So 5 people die at the scene. 1 dies later on. So we get 6 people dead, 2 people wounded on top of that. This is like overkill. It's really presented as like a defense. They try and there's a lot of stuff that gets thrown out. I did not know there were so many different weird things that you could call people in Wisconsin that are specific to Wisconsin.
I see. I feel like all of that is only relevant to people who are in Wisconsin. I don't think it's really a thing to anybody else.
Yeah. And apparently Bob Cruto had problems with trespassers out here. We're going to find that out at the trial, that there was apparently a thing where people from Wisconsin and Minnesota, they would go back and forth between the two places. The communities were if you look at this on a map, the communities are kind of intertwined, and you're coming out here to hunt, but I think the view of people who lived in rural Wisconsin looking at people who came from Minnesota to hunt was kind of it had nothing to do with race. It was like looking down your nose at a weekend warrior kind of situation.
Right. None of it was all just people against people, I guess, if you're going to say it. I don't know that your race had anything to do with it.
Right. So some of the things that are allegedly said, I don't know that we get to racial slurs. I think they use some nicknames. If you called somebody a Benny, and that's because they're not a local. You know what I'm saying? If you're at the beach and you were making fun of tourists, right. I think it's more like that than it is racist. But there could still be some racism here. That's fine. It doesn't justify it, like you were saying. So Kai's trial gets underway on a Saturday, September 10th of 2005. It has to be moved around a couple of different places along the way. They finally get 12 jurors and 2 alternates from a neighboring county. They are busing these people a long way and sequestering them because of how much coverage this got up there.
Yeah, that's why it's on a Saturday. They probably were having trial every single day.
Yeah, and the state pretty much presents exactly what I just said. There were some issues along the way. It was kind of weird that he took the scope off his gun, and then that causes the court to break at one point and like check to see if there's forensic testing that's done, like in the difference in how the shooting had gone on and what law enforcement had done with the gun. It turns out to be largely irrelevant. The state presents and rests its case pretty much exactly like we just described. They just have people from the scene talking. And Kai gets on the stand for the defense. He tells the jury that he feared for his life and he only fired because another hunter's shot nearly hit him. He details how the other hunters approached him. And I am sure it is with all of the adrenaline rush you can imagine, like with somebody who's experienced like different hunters on their land trespassing, and like somebody's trying to help them out with that. Like it's not going to be polite because like everybody's puffing up a little bit to like look a little bigger and make sure that they understand not to be here.
But I don't believe that he was shot at.
No, I don't. No, that's not a thing.
Right. And so that is he says that everything happened because of that. And I just I don't believe a person, a group of people would approach and say, and shoot and say like, get off my land.
Right. And there are some language issues here. More understanding in terms of like the language issues than it is like a complete language barrier, but they make a little use of that. For Kai's part, he responds and tells everybody how he shot. He tells the jury how he shot each one. He basically shot 2 victims in the back because they were disrespectful, according to his testimony. He is able to recount with a lot of detail how he killed each of these people. On the stand, he said that he wished it wasn't happening. And he gets into an argument with one of the prosecutors over who deserved to die, and basically says that at least 3 of them deserve to die, including Bob, who is the owner of the property out here. He also testifies that Joseph deserved to die. And I think his like rationale there was that Joseph cut him off to stop him from going anywhere and gave him the finger. He said that Alan Lasky had provoked him and that Alan Lasky was using a gun to threaten his life. He reenacts all this while he's on the stands. He imitates like using the rifle, and like it's actually kind of creepy. His public defender gets in and tries to like offset some of what Kai is doing on the stand, and it doesn't go all that well. He tries to present a much bigger language barrier than there is, and he talks about there being a misunderstanding to the question, did they deserve to die? And that it was more about responsibility and the contribution to the circumstances that they were sharing in with Kai. But by September 16th, so 6 days into this, Kai is found guilty of all 6 charges of first-degree intentional homicide, 3 charges of attempted homicide. Steve Cohn notes that like he had faced verbal abuse and racial epithets in this confrontation. The jury that was selected is all white. Basically all of the minorities had been squeezed out of the jury selection. On November 8th, he's sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms plus 70 years. He ends up getting 40 years for the 2 counts of attempted homicide. He gets an additional 5 years for the additional homicides in the first degree. They do this weird thing to like basically get him up to the point that he has life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a little tricky how they sentence him. It honestly doesn't make the most sense, but I understand what the judge was doing because their hands were kind of tied with the statutes there. Obviously, this is a time when Wisconsin does not have the death penalty. In 2005, they would have been one of 12 states that didn't have it at all. So he's moved around a couple of different Wisconsin correctional institutions. At one point, they even move him out of state. They move him to Iowa. And there are some issues over racial concerns. I don't know if it's him, his perception, or other people and their treatment. Generally, a lot of correctional institutions and prisons have racial concerns. So, I'm flagging this, and I'm not blowing this off. I'm just saying, like, in this instance, this type of response, I don't know how you respond to that without like some serious mental health issue going on. Does that make sense?
I think so. I can say that I've never seen, even in, reference in other places, I've never seen like a huge racial problem that seems to be in his mind, like at his perspective.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. Like, I've never seen any sort of issue.
I believe there's racism and violent racism going on between a lot of different groups, including these groups. I just don't think this situation is it. They could have gone a different route in terms of his defense, working on a defense for more related to his mental health or more PTSD or trauma related. They didn't go that way, so we can't really comment on that because that would be completely speculating on what ifs.
Right, but he sat on the stand and testified that he had testified in front of the jurors that he had shot, I believe he said, 2 of the victims in the back because they were disrespectful, okay, which is clearly not a self-defense move, right?
Right.
He also said that people deserve to die. And his testimony pretty much in and of itself, which if you're going to be arguing for self-defense and you don't have a witness on your side to say that you acted in self-defense, you're going to be testifying, right?
Yeah.
There's no way around that if that's what the argument is and there's not some sort of independent, compelling evidence. And then once you're testifying, the jury serving as the finder of fact in the case, they get to weigh the credibility of what you're saying, right? Yeah. And they get to decide, do we believe this was done in self-defense? And, that's kind of how that goes. And so he pretty much had to testify because the people that he had shot that survived, they certainly weren't going to be testifying that he acted in self-defense, right?
Yeah.
And so, and to my knowledge, there was no one else there when it occurred. It was 2 surviving victims, and the rest of the people died.
Yeah. That's a good summary. Yeah.
Okay.
The prosecution's basically said this guy had a temper tantrum with a gun.
Yeah, but it was a little more than that, obviously. But yeah, that's what happened. It was completely uncalled for. There was no chance that it was ever going to be found to be self-defense.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabRottiCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.